Okay, grade 8s, you guys did digestion yesterday and respiration as well. We're going to do circulation today. Respiration is a nice lead into circulation. So the circulatory system itself is the main transport system in your body, right? Red blood cells, white blood cells, plasma. It's kind of like the main road network. That's why, road networks are called arteries, all right? The purpose of the circulatory system is to transfer nutrients, oxygen, and remove waste from metabolic processes, right? So think of your circulatory system as a complex road network, okay? All right, so contrary to popular belief, the heart does not look like this. That is not what the heart looks like, all right? This is a schematic diagram of the heart. It's the main muscle in the circulatory system. Your heart never stops beating, right? So even when you're asleep, your heart is still working, okay? So it rests in between beats. The heart itself is a tandem pump, all right? So there's a right side and there's a left side. So I'm going to pull up this heart model, okay? So the heart actually sits right in your body like this, right below your sternum now. Your heart is not this big. Your heart is about the size of your fist, okay? Now if I open this up, the heart itself is 4 chambers, okay? So there are 2 chambers up top, and they pump at the same time. So they fill with blood, and they contract at the same time. And then the bottom part are 2 more chambers, all right? So the top chambers are called atria. All right, so you have the right atrium and the left atrium, and the bottom chambers are called the ventricles. And you have the right ventricle and the left ventricle, okay? So I'm going to talk about what they do, but essentially, the right and left side work together at the same time. So when the right atrium pumps blood into the right ventricle, the left atrium pumps blood into the left ventricle at the same time. And when the ventricles empty and pump blood away from the heart, they do it at the same time as well. So there are 2 pumps, and they do they do the same thing, but they feed and take blood away from different parts of the body. Okay? Now, one thing that you should notice is the heart itself is curved on this side, and it's flat on this side. So that's how you tell the difference between the left side and the right side. So the left side will generally dip down a little bit further, and it's straighter on the edge. The right side is curved a bit more, and it doesn't go as deep, all right? So the right ventricle is on this side, the left ventricle is on this side, left atrium and right atrium. So I'm going to talk about what they do, and I'm going to come back to this model. We're also going to dissect a heart for you, and we'll show you what it actually really looks like, okay? I'm not going to do the dissection necessarily in this lecture, though. It'll be separate. Okay? So the big things that you should know is the right side has deoxygenated blood. So the right side is taking blood from the body back to the lungs. Okay? So blood from the body back to the lungs is the right side. The left side takes blood from the lungs and pumps it to the body. So the left side is oxygenated. So you should know the difference between the 2 of those. All right? Now, I am going to use this little heart model, even though the heart doesn't look like this. All right? So this is the right side, and this is the left side. The left atrium is up here. Atrium is spelled like this. The right atrium is here. The left ventricle is here. And the right ventricle is here. Ventricle is spelled like that. Okay? Right side is deoxygenated. It gets blood from the body. The left side is oxygenated, and it gets blood from the lungs. So what happens is the right side of the heart pumps blood back to the lungs to get reoxygenated, and the left side pumps blood to the body so the body can use that blood. Right? So it's this internal circuit that's constantly recycling the same blood. So you should know this, all right? The heart, and I've already mostly described this, but the atria receive blood, the ventricles pump blood out of the heart. The left atrium receives blood from the lungs, the right atrium receives blood from the body. Now blood always goes from the body, all right, into the atrium, so either from the lungs or from the body. Blood always goes into the atrium, pumped into the ventricles, and then pumped away from the heart. You never have blood going from left atrium to right atrium, for example. All right? So those two separate sides, the right and left sides, are always kept separate. So the left ventricle pumps blood that is oxygen-rich to the body through the biggest artery in the body, and that's the aorta. The right ventricle pumps blood that requires oxygen back to the lungs through an artery called the pulmonary artery. Now, pulmonary is referring to the lungs. So anytime you see that term pulmonary, we're talking about what's happening between the lungs and the heart. Okay? So, again, if I go back to this heart model, this big guy right here kind of looks like a saxophone, is the aorta. Okay? And you can also see that the atrium, they're really smooth. They're not muscular because all they're doing is collecting blood. They don't pump blood. So blood always goes from the atrium through these valves, okay, into the ventricles. Now you can see these ventricles at the bottom here. This is the right ventricle. The right ventricle has, right, you can see these muscular walls. The ventricles pump blood away, all right? So the atrium just kind of like collect blood. The ventricles actively pump blood away. And that's why you see the difference between the top and the bottom of the heart. Okay? These guys right here, so these two things that I'm holding my hands on right here, these are the pulmonary arteries, and they're taking blood from the right ventricle back to the lungs. All right? So, here's your heart blood flow. Okay? So remember I said all anatomical diagrams require color. Color helps us to differentiate what's going on. Alright, so the right atrium receives blood from the body. The left atrium receives blood from the lungs. And you can see these arrows show you the pathway of blood. Alright? This vein, the pulmonary vein, brings blood to the left atrium. Pulmonary means lungs. Alright? So from the lungs to the left atrium. Blood goes into the left ventricle and then out into the body. Okay? This is the biggest vein in my body, the vena cava. It brings blood from the body into the right atrium. Blood goes to the right ventricle, so we pump blood into the right ventricle, and that goes back to the lungs. So this is the pathway of blood flow back in this way. Okay? The left ventricle, like I said, is flatter. The right ventricle is more angled. You can see the left ventricle has a more muscular wall. So it has to actually pump blood into the body to get to the cells. So this is a bit narrower because it's under higher pressure. So the muscles are a bit stronger on the left side. The right side is a bit more relaxed because we're not as stressed to get blood back to the lungs. All right? So in your body, you have approximately 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels. That's a crazy amount. All right? So there's three types of main blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. The blood vessels themselves have connective tissue on the outside. There's a middle layer of muscular tissue, and then there's a skin tissue on the inner layer of the blood vessels. Okay? And the arteries, veins, and capillaries all have slightly different structures. Okay, so arteries, and the aorta is the biggest artery in the body. Arteries carry blood away from the heart, always. So that's a big thing you need to know. Arteries pump blood away from the heart. Okay? Now, if I'm going to draw a little diagram of an artery. Actually, I'm not going to have a slide later. All right? But the arteries themselves, you should know differences between arteries and veins. So arteries are muscular. They pump blood under pressure to all parts of the body as quickly and efficiently as possible. All right, so actually if I do draw an artery here, the tube that blood flows in, so if there's blood inside here, right? So the blood's going to flow through here. This is called a lumen. All right? And the lumen is narrow because arteries have muscular walls. So when you get a blood pressure, or you look for a blood pressure in your body, you look for blood pressure in your arteries, not in your veins. Your veins don't carry blood under pressure. Okay? And they're under pressure because they've got to get blood to your cells as quickly as possible to be able to make ATP. All right? So arteries are under pressure. So let's say you got in a sword fight. All right? And you got cut. You'll be able to tell if you cut a vein or an artery by the way the blood comes out of your body. So if blood oozes out, you hit a vein because the veins aren't under pressure. But let's say blood spurts out every time your heart beats and it spurts out under pressure, that means you cut an artery, and that's a very dangerous thing to happen. All right? So don't get into sword fights is my key point there. All right? Veins themselves, veins carry blood to the heart. All right? So to the heart, veins are less muscular and a lot wider, so much wider lumen. Okay, so they're non-muscular. They return blood to the heart by gravity and a one-way valve system. All right? So if I'm standing all day, blood is moving back to my heart. Blood's also pooling in my feet, and that's why my feet swell throughout the day. All right? And when I contract my muscles, all right, they squeeze the blood through my veins back to the heart. So that's why if I'm on like a long-distance flight, not much of us are flying right now, but if I'm on a long-distance flight, you often have exercises that you need to do, or people wear compression socks or get up and walk around and try to get that blood flowing out of their legs, because it can cause lots of different types of problems like varicose veins or low blood pressure or blood clots, right? If we don't move around, okay? So the tube in the veins are wider, and so your veins carry about 65% of your blood, all right? So most of your blood is in your veins because we don't need it most of the time. So it's just kind of sitting in there. Now, as we move around, right, generally our work rate increases. So we need to get blood to get back to our body, to get back to our lungs quicker, to get oxygenated. So as I move around and contract my muscles, right, that will return blood back to the heart quicker, right? So it's a passive system that the body uses, and it's pretty brilliant actually. Okay, so the veins are not muscular; they don't carry a blood pressure. As blood moves through the veins, the valves close and they can't go back. So the blood kind of inches its way back to the heart as required. All right. Now capillaries are different than both of these two. So capillaries are microscopic. All right, so they're very small. So each one of these would be a capillary. Okay. So and actually, if I draw my blood vessels kind of as a road network, here's what we have. All right, we have sort of our main arteries, and we say that in our road network as well. So these are arteries, and then those break up into smaller blood vessels called arterioles. All right, so blood travels through here. And then, so think about this as like the main highways in Calgary. This would be like Crowchild Trail or Stony Trail. And then these would be like main roads that go into communities. So if I drive into Sunset, for example, Sunset Boulevard would be, like a main road in a community. All right. So the arterioles would be like main blood vessels that go to organs. All right. So, right. So they would feed in and out of organs. All right, so then, you know, if I live in like Silver Springs in Calgary, this would be like Silver Springs Boulevard. All right, and then what happens is these break up into capillary beds. So the arterioles branch off into capillary beds. So think about, if I'm thinking about a road network, this is the side streets and the places where people live. So these are like the smaller residential streets. And then there's houses on the residential streets, right? So this is where the cells are going to be. So the capillaries move through the cells, right? So they move in and around the cells. So it's kind of like driving your car into your home. The home would be like a cell, and then the gas exchange occurs between the capillary and the cell. The exchange with the house as the cell would be like you moving in and out of your house. All right? So the diffusion actually occurs at the very small part. Okay? So we have capillary beds. Gas exchange happens in the capillary beds. As gas exchange happens, the capillaries pick up waste and they get deoxygenated. Okay? Blood is moving this way always. Blood never moves from vein to artery. Blood always moves from artery to veins. We have these larger veins called venules. And then that breaks up into main veins. And the biggest vein in the body is the vena cava. So blood flow always goes from artery to capillary to vein. All right? Or artery to arterial to capillary to cells to venule to veins. And then it goes back to the heart via the veins. And then we go back to the lungs from the heart. The arteries take blood away from the heart and go to the body. All right? So, capillaries is where the gas exchange happens. So it's the site of gas exchange between cells and the circulatory system. So you should know that. All right? Oxygen from arteries moves through capillaries to the body. All right? Via to the body tissues. The capillaries remove waste, and particularly carbon dioxide, because of diffusion and concentration gradients. You should know this. Okay, so you should have these notes out with you when you write your quiz next week, by the way, right? So the capillaries have two main adaptations that help them exchange gases really efficiently. Epithelial means skin. We've already talked about that. So they have skin tissue that is only one cell layer thick. All right? And they're very narrow. So they're thin and narrow. So what happens is if this is a capillary, blood vessels can travel single file. Sorry, blood cells. So RBC is red blood cell. So RBCs can travel single file through the capillary, and that way we don't miss any gas exchange. Because if they could travel like 2 or 3 wide, right, you would diffuse between this cell and this cell, but you would miss the other two. All right? So they're very thin, so gas exchange is really efficient, and they're also narrow, so red blood cells travel single file. So you should know these two adaptations that capillaries have. So this shows big differences, right? So arteries, muscular, narrow opening or lumen for the blood to flow. Veins, non-muscular, not oxygenated, that's why it's shown as blue, right? Oxygen changes red blood cells red because of hemoglobin. The veins themselves carry a lot of blood. They have a wider lumen, and you can see this here. Okay? Capillary is thin and narrow, and it's microscopic in comparison to the others, and that's the site of gas exchange. Okay, so if we look at circulation, right, the left side is oxygenated, pumps blood to the body. You can see where the arrows are going. The blood goes through capillary beds and back to the right side of the heart, where it's deoxygenated because it's been used. And then it goes back to the lungs, into the alveoli. We get rid of wastes, and then we reoxygenate it, and it comes back to the left side. So that's how your circulation works. Circulation between the body and the heart is called systemic circulation. So between body and heart is systemic circulation. The circulation between the heart and the lungs is called pulmonary circulation. So let's look at the components of blood. I'll post a Magic School Bus video about this as well. But blood is the second largest connective tissue in the body. Your skin is the biggest one. So in the blood, right, it connects everything together. In the blood, you don't just have red blood cells, but you have white blood cells for immunity, you have platelets for clotting, and you have plasma, which carries proteins and nutrients, and that's also where all these things are dissolved in. It's mostly water. So 55% of your blood is plasma. 45% is everything else. So what do red blood cells do? They contain hemoglobin. So it's an iron-based molecule that bonds to oxygen and carries it to body system. That's why you need iron in your diet. If you don't have iron, that's called anemia. And you can't transfer oxygen to your body efficiently. So we remove carbon dioxide as well from red blood cells. All right, so red blood cells will transfer carbon dioxide out of your blood back to the lungs. They're red when oxygenated, and they're like a purpley blue when they're not. Mature red blood cells have no nucleuses, and that allows them to bend and curve a lot more efficiently through really narrow capillaries. All right, so they lose their nucleuses. We'll talk about the immune system more in high school biology, but white blood cells are part of the immune system, right? This is a big thing right now, immunity, right? And vaccination to deal with COVID. So white blood cells consume bacteria and viruses to fight off infection and disease. Now we have like 25 different types of white blood cells, all right? Now all of our blood cells, including white and red blood cells, come from bone marrow and our big bones, our long bones, right? Femur, tibia, fibula, humerus, radius, and ulna. We've already talked about that in class as well. All right? But your immune system comes from the bone marrow and it travels through your circulatory system. Now some of these guys are in your circulatory system. Some of them come from your lymphatic system. All right? Places like your spleen. All right? The lymph system are another series of vessels that accompany the circulatory system. They're kind of like the back alleys of your body. So we try to isolate pathogens in the lymph system and fight them off there so the circulatory system can work properly. These are platelets. Platelets are fragments of cytoplasm from white blood cells, and they help clot blood. All right, so they have enzymes that work and hormones that communicate with the rest of your circulatory system to clot blood when there's an open cut. The plasma itself, if it's centrifuged, so it's been spun very quickly to separate the parts, you can see the components. Plasma, white blood cells and platelets, and red blood cells. All right, so the plasma itself is a yellowy liquid. It transfers nutrients and carries away waste, and it's the solvent for your circulatory system. Anyway, those are the big parts of the circulatory system. I'll do more on the heart in a dissection video. I might not do that today, we'll see, but those are the big parts of the circulatory system you need to know for grade 8 science. So we'll sign off here and I'll post this video so you guys can watch it.